Kraken, it is Krakenation here, coach of Silly Goose University. That's a new one. We haven't made a video in a hot minute. This is like take number something or other. We've tried a few times, got some technical difficulties. We managed to steam through. So we've got the boys, Sean, and also known as Inversify, and Noah, also known as Strokefish, coming in to give us some high-level analysis of our Draft Classic 15 drafts. You guys want to go ahead and say hi?
Personally, I was partial to take number a few takes ago.
And there's Noah's
Hello.
greetings. The screech of God, no, this is really bad, dude. All right, that's fine. Okay,
We might have to postpone that. I'm not gonna lie. That's really bad.
all right. We're gonna start. We're gonna see how it goes, and if it gets too unmanageable, we'll do this another time. But we're gonna start off with our boy Freeze Draft here. We got the nice little team builder here that we have teams uploaded into, so we're gonna be able to give you guys some data points, some stats that you guys can use for the visual along the way. It's gonna make our production quality look a lot higher than it actually is right now. So there's that. So right off the bat, we've got like I said, Freeze Draft. I like Freeze Draft. He has some staples. Arachnid we know is a free classic. Some good speed. I think he's got like some solid speed tiers. Pretty good like offensive team in general here. Like you got the Celesteela as like this defensive backbone, but otherwise it's like a pretty offensive focused team. I feel like. I don't know. Let's hear it from the boys. What do you guys think?
Yeah, I think Celesteela still fits in a team because it's very annoying for a lot of defensive Pokemon to break through because everything is just like, I want to click Toxic, but obviously you cannot Toxic Celesteela. And it can just sit there and be a Leech Seed, fat, annoying Stallmon. But it can also be run offensive with automatized sets.
Yeah, it's not a passive on.
I really like how he took 3 flying types in his first 4 picks, and it like worked out like really like it's like completely fine. That just makes me happy.
I didn't even realize that. Homie's like doubling down.
He tripled
down.
He really went for it.
But yeah, I think it's overall a very solid draft. I'm a fan of Mega Sceptile, especially on a draft that already has a 4 times Ice Week Pokemon. Because I don't know. But I think overall it's very solid. I think Silvally is going to be pretty nice here with the buffed multi-attack because a little offensive draft and, whatever type he needs to fulfill for the matchup, I think Silvally is a pretty nice stopgap here. Like he's not like completely dependent on Silvally to like shore up his defense, which is how that's when you don't want to be using it, but it's nice to just like fill in some gaps here.
Yeah. Is Noah still alive? Is he still with us?
Yeah, I was just waiting for my turn to talk because of all the creaking in the background, so I apologize in advance, guys. But I share the similar sentiments as you guys. I think it's a really solid draft overall. I think to touch on some things that you guys didn't, I think Inteleon makes a really cool Terra Captain. I think it's really strong with either like Terra Water or just getting the added coverage of like Terra Electric or Terra Grass, depending on sorry about that. And just depending on the matchup. So I think, I think it's a good Pokemon and a good team overall.
Yeah. I think also I'm realizing I can like pull up Mons over here on the right for the screen while we're talking about them. So they've got some like while we're talking about Inteleon, we can see Inteleon's move pool over here and everything.
You can run Pound Inteleon.
You could. It's definitely viable, known for its I think I like what I like with this team is it does a good job supporting Iron Valiant. I feel like they did a pretty good job with that. Like if you want like Landorus Therian, we know is like a pretty good like versatile mon that can fill a lot of roles. Can definitely like run like rock sets and like get Iron Valiant some like chip and stuff. You've got like Arachnid to set up some webs for it. I just feel like you've got some good ways to support Iron Valiant, which is obviously like far and away like the threat of this draft. So I like that about this team.
The biggest problem with this team is that the hazard game is really bad.
Yeah,
obviously having a webs option is nice, but like your rockers are Landorus, Therian, and Cursula, which is just horrendous.
And I do think that kind of
pigeonholing.
Yeah, it pigeonholes Landorus Therian a ton, right? Like, and you can kind of see in the graph down here, like the hazard game is not very strong, especially setting wise. Like he just really is gonna like struggle there. So that's something maybe it wouldn't have surprised me. Like, I kind of get what you're saying, Sean. Like, I understand why he wanted Mega Sceptile at the top speed tier, but like another Mega could that could like set rocks for him there could have been like a pretty good fit too. I feel like.
Yeah.
Oh my god. All right, moving on.
That's what happens when I unmute for 1 second. I was trying to say something real quick
what's up?
before we move on. I
Last
also think
thought.
in the Hazard game, last little kind of closing thoughts, I think a lot of his team is really weak to hazards as well. I know he does have some removal with Sovali, Thunderous, and Landorus, but two of those mons don't really love running it. Like Lando can, depending on the set, but obviously it's pigeonholing it into a specific kind of role there. So
Yeah, I think exactly. Like that's a good point. That I feel like maybe the weakness of this draft is that like Landers is forced to run like a lot of like more supportive stuff, and then it doesn't really get to show off its full like what makes it a good mon. All right, moving on. We're gonna go take a look at Sean. Whose draft is this?
I'm the Sorrow.
Sorry,
I got you.
Sarah's
let's
draft.
update. It's got Terra Flapple.
That's it.
That's it.
That's it.
Only
Wow.
one. Because he doesn't have anything else that he can pair with it. He could have done Centiskorch and Cryogonal, which arguably would have been better, but Flapple's also a very good Terramon, so.
So I like the direction of pairing Coco with like a.
Obstagoon.
Also, like, I don't know why Flapple like, doesn't have points here. I don't know what's going on here, man.
It's because you check it. If you uncheck it, it gets points.
Oh, because it's using the Terra list. Right. Okay, that
Yeah.
makes sense. Yeah.
Please excuse me. Definitely an Obstagoon.
Wait,
I mean, it's
hold
got
up.
the right color scheme.
Why is Obstagoon a Berserker? That's so funny. I can't explain it, guys. The production value is all over the place.
I mean, they look kind of similar. They have the same. They both have red eyes.
They have a
They're
similar
both, like,
vibe
gray
going
and
on.
Black. Yeah.
So yeah, I like the like. I think this was a good way to start with a Coco draft, right? Like if you get an Iron Mon, you might have even liked to see like one more of them, but this is at least a good one where it's like pretty different, a Mon from.
Yeah.
And then Howlucha obviously makes a lot of sense in those kinds of drafts, so I like that start. Thought it was a pretty good draft. Otherwise, though, I'm definitely like curious what you guys think. Sean, go ahead. Sorry, I cut you off.
My biggest issue, like, I don't love like. Obviously, in Natex, like everything in their mother gets scald back, and I don't love this team's scald switch-ins.
Yeah, good point.
You can bring the only water resist is Flapple, which is not going to be switching into scalds. Cryogonal can take some waters because it's just got good natural bulk. Coco can take some waters if you run like more defensive roost sets, but it doesn't always want to be switching into those. So, unless the plan is like, okay, I'm going to bring Cryogonal to beat Bulky Waters, which is, or like switch into Bulky Waters, which is not great. I don't love that. That being said, you can take advantage of it with Flapple a little bit, being able to potentially set up on them. I guess, Obstagoon doesn't have very good special defense, but at least it does have guts. So it's like something.
Yeah.
93,
Why is the
81.
picture Obstagoon here?
Oh.
Why is it?
Yeah.
God, I can't.
I don't know.
I can't
explain
I
it.
can't. It's my spreadsheet and I can't explain it. So, that's a good point.
But yeah, my other big problem with this draft is it slightly lacks immediate power. I feel like, obviously you have the Obstagoon, which is pretty good immediate power, but when you look other than that, Hawlucha is really only coming in once a game to try to clean. Coco has some power, but with the electric terrain nerf, it's not super good at breaking. I think Coco really shines in being able to be a good revenge killer, good setup options, good support for the team, while also being like a capable offensive Pokemon. Iron Treads is not the strongest. And then it's like a lot of like more defensive mons that can hit you, but not necessarily. Like Flapple is another mon where generally you're going to try to bring it in and try to set up and not just attack. Although you can definitely bring it as an attacker. I think it generally wants to come in and try to click Dragon Dance.
Yeah. Noah, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, 100% agree. I do. I actually was really worried that of this team specifically taking Iron Leaves because I think Iron Leaves was actually a really good fit on this team just because of the power, the electric terrain and things like that. So I ended up taking it for myself in round 6. I think me and Sean have a lot of good insight to this because we recently drafted a similar team to this, albeit better than this. And it does have a little bit like I think electric terrain teams inherently kind of have this problem where they're just going to be kind of frail. And it's really, you have to play them really, really well in order for them to work well. I do think with Pecharon and Hatterene, it's going to be kind of nice to alleviate that. But there are some defensive, like this team doesn't have an amazing ground resist. Especially if it's, I guess, like a Cryogonal or like a Halucha. But like Sean was saying earlier, like Halucha is kind of one of those bonds you don't really love switching in on moves. Like if it is, then it's probably going to be like a more defensive variant with like Roost or something, which just immediately removes its capabilities as a sweeper. So I think it's a kind of an average draft overall, and I think it just kind of lacks like that synergy with that electric terrain that you really want to be wanting to see on like a very hyper offensive breaker build. So yeah, it just kind of feels like very meh to me. Like a lot of the bulk is meh, a lot of the breaking is meh, but overall it's not horrible, but I think there's definitely some things you could work out maybe with free agency or even just good play maybe. I don't know.
Yeah, to add on to that, I think like the bulk, like a lot of the bulk doesn't have reliable recovery, which makes it prone to getting worn down. But because you also don't have like great breakers, then generally your games are going to go longer. So I think you're kind of just going to get chipped down eventually, and then maybe you can throw out your Halucha or something and try to win based off like an unburdened sweep. But if your opponent is like able to save something for that, I think this team's just going to kind of get worn down and taken out like that.
Yeah,
I agree.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. All right, let's keep things moving here. We got a lot of drafts to get through today. Oh, look! I know
the worst one of all.
I know the draft that this is. I know this one. So this is me. So I guess I should probably take the lead here. First of all, I started off the draft a little on the wrong foot. I had my eyes on 3 Pokemon in particular, and I had the 3rd pick of the draft. And when my pick came up, I was like, I like all 3 of these mons and they're still available, so I'm gonna trade back a little bit. And unfortunately, the choice got quickly made for me, which you would have thought was the idea behind trading back. But I ended up regretting that I wanted Chien-Pao a little more than I thought I did. And I kind of was bummed that it didn't fall to me after that. But that's okay. We got Kieran Black. It's a mod I've never drafted before. And after that, I got put together a few more picks here. Great Tusk. I was like, I told Sean this at the start of the draft. Like, I want to make rapid spin a priority of my like drafting style this season, where I want to get like a really good spinner. Because if I'm drafting Kieran Black, it makes sense if I'm drafting these like Hazard's Weak Mon, but also just felt like it alleviates a lot of like the ability to set up Hazard on my opponent's side of the field and kind of like leans into those strategies. It's a weird thing I just wanted to really try to make an emphasis on. So I picked up Great Tusk, which felt like a good partner for Kieran Black, and then I picked up Scissor just because it felt like a good partner for those first 2, and it's a mon I like using. And after that, I kind of made a draft plan with Sean and kind of like slapped something together that was like filled a lot of roles, some mons I wanted to use, some different things that I haven't used before. And I had this draft plan, and for the first time in my goddamn life, I didn't get sniped one time. So I gotta say, all things considered, I ended up pretty freaking happy with my draft. I feel like I've done a really good job supporting Kieran Black. And then also, so I've got some good breaking power, like Terra Chandelure. Obviously, Kieran Black's a great breaker, but Terra Chandelure can do that for me too. Zarude can kind of function as like a powerful hitter. Azel can function as a pretty hard hitter. Even Great Tusk can, honestly, with more offensive sets. It's got a pretty good offensive typing there too. So I've got some good breaking. I've got some good cleaning options, like things like, again, Scale Shot, Kieran Black could do that. Mega Scissor obviously is a great potential cleaner, sweeper type thing. So we've got some potential there. We've got some defensive options, like Mega Scissor can be a defensive Pokemon. I got the Terra Carbink that can do a little bit of that. Kieran Black can now run pretty bulkier sets. So I can run, maybe, well, not like a stall team by any means, like a more like balanced team. So I feel like I can run a lot of different approaches here. And I feel like I supported overall most of like my top tiers pretty damn well. I got some Terramons I'm really excited to use. I was like, had my eyes on both of them early and I got both of them. So if I just say weaknesses of my draft, I think the main one is my top end speed. Not that it's not there. Jolteon's a real mon, and I feel like I can bring it to a decent number of matchups. But it's just like I'm a little worried that like it's not completely respected by most of my opponents, and it's gonna leave me a little vulnerable when things like I have a lot of like middling speed type mons in like this like 80 to 100 range that are pretty important to my draft. So I don't love my top end speed. Otherwise, though, I'm genuinely like that's like the main thing I kind of like am iffy about. After that, like I really like the rest of my draft and how it turned out. Like, all right, but that's my thoughts, and I'd love to hear. Let's start with Noah here. Noah, what do you think?
Oh, dude, I was trying to get out because I thought Sean was going to go first, but
I can go first.
yeah, go.
All right. I agree with most of what you said. I think it's a very solid draft. You definitely have the capability to run a little bit longer of a game if you want, but I think overall, probably mostly the game plan is going to be shorter games in general, which I think is fine. Like you said, I think speed wise, like I think 115 is definitely going to be too slow to be your top speed tier. So you really need to have people prepare for this Jolteon 5-pointer. Wasn't allowed to Terra, so how much they do. At least you do have a one very good priority Pokemon in Mega Scizor, and definitely more than a few good Scarfers. So yeah, it's not horrible. But talking about your weaknesses, I definitely could see that being an issue. I would have preferred like one more like reliable rocker as well. I know we talked about this, and you feel like okay, between Great Tusk, Azelf, Carbink, I can bring something each week with rocks, which is fair. I don't think it's like a huge weakness, but I would prefer to see one more thing because I think Carbink is a 2-pointer. You don't want to be bringing it super often, and then Azelf and Great Tusk can usually have like better things they might want to be doing.
Yeah, that's totally
overall.
fair.
Yeah, overall, I really like your draft for sure.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
think
I do. I do as well.
Real quick to comment on what he said. I just like my logic is like I feel like yeah, Great Tusk and Azelf both do want to do a lot of things, and they have better things to do than rocks every time. But I think when they're two mons that are likely to come to like almost every week at the very least, it's pretty easy to be like, okay, this is the week that Azelf or Great Tusk is gonna run rocks, and like one of them can always make space for it. I feel like is what I'm hoping, and then in the rare week that Carbink also can come, like then like they can kind of just do their own things. But I didn't feel too stressed about that, but I understand where you're coming from.
Mm-hmm.
Noah, go ahead.
Yeah,
Sorry.
I would have. I was similar to Sean. Like I was like, like I don't know if Great Tusk and Azelf want to run that every single week. It is possible. I think Great Tusk, can run it more often than you think. But obviously, it's not the ideal. I wish I would have loved to see like not a Clodsire specifically, but like some kind of hazard bot that's like a mid tier that also can function as like a wall. But I don't know what would have been a good fit in that scenario. So overall, I do really like the team. I think every mon is viable and every mon has a chance of coming, especially with Carbink being a Terramon. I think that's really solid for a 2-pointer. So yeah, I'm really scared to face this team, and yeah, that's all I really got to say.
I think one last thing I'm a little worried about that I'll mention right now is that I don't have a good normal type, and I know everyone likes to joke about Akeem and his low tier normals, but like I don't have one, and that does worry me a little bit because I don't have like a lot of good ways to beat opposing ghosts otherwise. It's like Zarude, and that's basically it, and so that's not ideal. So I'm a little worried about that too, just like the lack of like a good ghost type answer. We'll see how that pans out though. All right, so we can go ahead and move on to the next draft. We got Zihai. Is that who this is? Yeah.
Yeah.
There we go. Okay. No, Sean, you want to start us off?
All right. First thing, Zihai, you're a coward for not drafting all of the Ruin mods. Stopping halfway through. Jokes aside, I really liked the beginning of this draft. And then he drafted like 2 1-pointers on the end and has 9 extra points left over, which, I mean, okay. I've always known like Zihai, he likes to look at like potential matchups and like what his opponents draft and say, hey, I'm weak in this matchup. Let me draft this specific Pokemon that makes me better into that matchup. But that 9 points is a little excessive, especially when you have 2 1-point Pokemon.
Yeah, that doesn't make sense.
Barely do anything. But he always has some more free agents. Zihai and I also had a discussion about Terra Belly Bolt, and how it does have very strong bulk. 109, 81, 83 is pretty solid, and it just kind of can be annoying. Both electromorphosis and static are pretty good abilities. Otherwise, yeah, it's kind of interesting. Like Chen Pao and Ogre Pawn together. I think overall will probably do pretty well, especially with like Ogre Pawn spamming like U-turn. Like if you ever go into a grass, you just get U-turned on into Chen Pao, and then as the person who has drafted Chen Pao the last 2 seasons, it's a pretty good Pokemon. But yeah, I could also see this team end up getting worn down some weeks if it isn't able to apply the offensive pressure. Just because the main two Pokemon, no recovery on them, kind of their big weakness. He's got some lower tiers with some recovery, like Belly Bolt and Moltres, but that's kind of the main weakness I see. But overall, I think it's there's a lot on Chen Pao and Ogre Pawn's shoulders to kind of be the main offense. A little bit Iron Crown too, but I think that they're both very capable Pokemon up to the task, and got a very capable trainer as well.
Noah, what are your thoughts?
I think the team, like Sean was saying, is really good. Also, pardon a loud noise right here. I think it's a little bit knock weak, I will say. I mean, obviously, like you have an item locked mon, which I always am kind of hesitant towards as someone that drafted basically 3 item locked mons in one draft. But things like Moltres, things like Chen Pao, like they don't want to be running boots every week. I know he has a great defogger in Tapu Fini, which pairs really well with Ting Lu. As Sean has mentioned, like Ting Lu kind of feels weird in that dex formats only because everything gets toxic and it doesn't, so it feels a little bit worse. But with Tapu Fini, it does have that ability to negate that. Though, with a bot like Ting Lu that just kind of spams Stealth Rocks and Spikes, it's not ideal that your hazard removal is a defog on Moltres and Tapu Fini, because you're kind of like removing that progress that could potentially allow Chen Pao to get the kills that it needs or Ogre Pawn to get the kills that it needs. But I kind of echo the same sentiment Sean had. Like, I think this team is going to be really annoying to deal with, both defensively and offensively. Like, it's just, you're going to be having to deal with Ting Lu and having to break that, and then you're also in Tapu Fini, and then you're also going to have to deal with taking on Chen Pao and Ogre Pawn. So I think that could be kind of annoying, but I think as long as you kind of can get good reads with like hazards and then just chipping down things like Bellabolt and the lack of recovery that he has on his team, I think you can kind of break through this. And obviously, yeah, the 9 points on the table is kind of ridiculous. But
Yeah.
like he literally could have evolved at least one of the 2 of his 1-pointers, but he'll probably figure something out later on. So I think he's just saving his free agents for that.
Yeah, I feel like that's kind of what I'm gonna add on at the end here. Just that, like, I feel like this is almost like an unfinished work because, like, that's maybe he's just planning on like adjusting those as matchups come along for him, and that's why. But it just is like weird to, I feel like, judge a draft that like 9 points is not an insignificant number of points to have left on the board. Like, that's like a good C tier mon that you can really
like 8% of your budget.
yeah, like you could like imagine this is one of these like just like a random like 8-point mon that like fills some giant need in this draft that would have like really made a lot of sense, and now it's just not there. So I'm hesitant to like give too much feedback on this draft for that reason. But like obviously we can talk, we've heard a lot of stuff about what's already there. I think it's a pretty cool draft overall. I think one thing that I would point out is like it's kind of a slow draft overall. It's definitely on the slower side. Like obviously Chen Pao and Ogre Pawn, like it has top end speed, but like not a lot of it. So I feel like it's pretty quick to get outpaced, and in that sense, like it relies on Chen Pao to outpace the outpacing a lot of the time, which we'll see if like it's able to do enough of that every week. But like I feel like, for example, like good Scarfers could like pretty easily, like even like middling speed to your Scarfers could pretty quickly terrify this draft.
I will say at least it's like, these are 2 Pokemon that are probably coming like pretty much every week.
Yeah, that's true.
So, like Chen Pao is pretty matchup proof. Ogre Pawn, Wellspring is pretty matchup proof as well. But yeah, we'll see. because it's weird because like most of the draft is like fairly bulky, and you don't typically really want to run Scarf unless you're running like a trick set or something. I don't know. We'll see.
We'll see. Yeah. All right. So moving along here, we've got who? Sean? Who's this?
This is goodness, I'm all messed up. This is Feather.
Feather. All right. So I'll go ahead and start here. So I actually think this is a pretty cool draft. I want to point out like there's a little bit of redundancy in the speed tiers. That seems to be like something I kind of harp on, but actually you can kind of see it right here. We got like a lot of Pokemon kind of cramped together right around here, which can be sometimes pretty exploitable. And also just like I don't know, I find myself wondering like what Giratina's role on this draft is a little bit. I guess like it doesn't feel like a draft that necessarily supported Giratina, but also I don't know, just because in the sense like maybe it's just because Darkrai is such a different like a specific role mon in the draft round two. I just didn't really see the synergy between his top picks a ton. And that's kind of throwing me for a loop. Like he has this Ogerpon that's supposed to be like a pretty good breaker, I guess, for the most part. Obviously, this isn't Terra, so it's not quite what it was. Giratina is this kind of like blanket checky offensive mon that also has some good bulk, like, but doesn't necessarily win games outright on its own very often by like way of sweep or something. And then Darkrai is that, but like I was kind of struggling to see the synergy between some of his top mons, I guess. The Terra Comfy is really terrifying. And I think Terra Sableye is an interesting one, although Sableye is a mon that really loves its typing, but I feel like just like prankster shenanigans could be cool with a Sableye. I was wondering if that like
I think
might
it was
be his
honestly
angle.
like the only other thing that could Terra.
Fair
like,
enough.
I think
That's
probably
fair.
10 out of 10 weeks they're running Terra Comfy.
And Terra Comfy is such like one of the best Terra mons we allowed, I understand. So that's something that also is worth like understanding. Like, yeah, he's probably just gonna bring Terra Comfy most weeks, and that kind of makes sense. But yeah, I think it's a pretty good draft overall. I just wanted to point out the speed tier concern, and then like I wasn't sure if there was that much synergy between his top picks. Sean, what do you think?
Yeah, for me, it's like this kind of the fears that you had with the last draft about like getting outsped and then just like losing is kind of exemplified here for me. With we'll see because you can run Giratina a little bit bulkier, and obviously Clodsire has got some decent bulk, and Vaporeon is able to pass some wishes to Giratina maybe. I didn't love the Cabal as much as I like Cobalion. I didn't love the pick here when you have Giratina that doesn't love fairies and Darkrai that doesn't love fairies, and then Cobalion is really a steel type that you should only be picking when you are pretty comfortable with dealing with fairies otherwise. And you do have the Clodsire, which deals with a lot of fairies, but it is a little bit vulnerable to getting taunted and such, which I think is actually kind of a big problem with this draft is like taunt is really good into this. You can really shut down Vaporeon, Clodsire, Comfey if it hasn't already gotten set up a good amount. And yeah, I Giratina is like, it's decent here because it's just like, okay, let me try to punch some holes, probably be bulky, and I could potentially get Wish Pass to me, punch some holes and try to set up something to win. But I don't know. I don't
Yeah,
see.
to add on to that and kind of finish off because I know we got to go a little quick. But I think this team is super hazard weak. Like Torkoal being your only removal, I guess Comfey and Giratina. But like Giratina to me as a defogger is like so meh because obviously it's not loving rocks. And then obviously you have Ogerpon, which is item lock, Darkrai, which doesn't love running hazards. Like I'm not a huge fan of that aspect of the draft. And I don't know, and like the top end power is really good, but otherwise I think it's just like one mon going down away from just like absolutely blowing this team up. So, and then like obviously like as you guys said with the speed tiers.
Yeah, and that's a fair concern too. And like to Noah's point, like I think like Giratina is a defogger, but it's like I don't love drafting a 20-point like top end mon like that to be like defogger, right? Like, so we'll see. I say that as I talked about my Great Tusk, but even still, like,
Great Tusk is different.
The Great Tusk is a little different, yeah. Like Giratina's like got other things to do, and like I don't know, it's doesn't feel quite as good. All right, so moving along here, next draft. Sean, why don't you start us off?
Okay, so I really like the combination of Mega Alakazam and Kartana. I've seen it on a couple different drafts before, but I think it's super nice to obviously Mega Alakazam is like basically the fastest thing in the game. Obviously, there's like Reggie. I don't think Regieleki even got drafted, but pretty much the fastest thing in the game. Very threatening if you don't have a good Dark type or a good Scarfer. And I feel like Kartana can really break holes very easily for Mega Alakazam. And I don't think Kartana is like that bad into a lot of Scarfers. Like Mega Alakazam actually has decent special bulk and not that great physical bulk, and Kartana's the other way around. So it's not like one like neutral move from either side is really gonna like definitely OHKO that like you could get like a
Sure.
neutral like move on Kartana, which what type is even neutral against? I can't even think of a type that's neutral against it right now. But like dark, like I guess Dark Pulse. But that's Mega Alakazam's weak to it, so disregard then. Maybe I'm hyping it up too much. But anyways, I do like this offensive combo, and then you have just a solid core between like Torrentee and Rotom Wash to support it. I'm not really a big Snorlax fan. I don't think it does quite enough. I think it's pretty hard to get going. And I think it just generally kind of gets shipped down a little bit too much. I'm also not a Flygon fan, so we'll see. He's a good player. He definitely knows how to maneuver some Pokemon to get into some good positions. But overall, I do like the draft.
No, how about you?
Yeah, I was actually about to ask if I can go next to team. I think this team has a little bit of a Dark and Ghost weakness because a lot of the mons that are going to be taking those on are things like Drapion, Hariyama, Darkspun, which like work, but like
Ghost, because Ghost you have Snorlax as well.
Right, yeah, but like most ghosts, like you can probably do something like because he's literally his only ghost answer is Snorlax. So you're like, okay, if I can find a way to like cripple the Snorlax, which albeit is difficult because it usually has like rest or like anything that ghost can usually do, maybe like a body press set, like like a Houndstone or something. You're like, okay, I can just spam like my Poltergeist, and then if he goes Snorlax, I can body press you. So it's gonna like depending on the matchup, depending on the ghost, depending on the dark. I think he's going to struggle kind of like finding ways around that and require a lot of really good playing to kind of avoid that just because of how dark and ghost weak it seems. But I think if he can keep up momentum with like Tornadus, Rotom Wash, and then just like break through, because like, as you guys were saying, like, or I guess just Sean, since he's the only one that's really given his thoughts, but Kartana and Mega Alakazam with like Rotom Wash. I wish he had more slow pivots now that I'm looking at it. I think if he'd really benefit from like a Uxie or something, or obviously not because of the dark and ghost weakness, but like something like that where it's like can be a bulky slow pivot with utility would really be appreciated in this draft, I think.
Yeah, so I feel like this is like I've seen this draft in like Gen 7 so many times. I feel like he's got like a lot of like the Gen 7 staples, like kind of to Sean's point, like the Alakazam Kartana, but then like Torn and Rotom with Alakazam. I feel like I've seen this draft before several times. And I mean, it's pretty good. I think Rotom Wash and like I like the top four a ton. I feel like they support each other really well, kind of to what Sean was saying, and they make a lot of sense together. The one thing I do want to point out is like a lack of good priority. Obviously, we see the highlight. Like, it's kind of like it's basically just Hariyama, and like I think that's about it that has priority in general.
Other than like random quick attacks.
Yeah, like random quick attacks. Like and Hariyama is not even a good priority use, right? It's got like what, like Bullet Punch and Vacuum Wave or something. Fake out. So like Hariyama is not like a terrific priority user, but just a lack of priority in this team in general. Like I could really easily see like if your opponent has like a good Scarfer, that can like hit Alakazam and Kartana. Like Sean was saying, they kind of like complement is a strong word, but like they don't lose necessarily the same things. Because they have like special and physical bulk respectively. But if you have a Mon that can like outspeed them, like a good Scarfer, like I feel like that could quickly become a pretty big problem for this draft. To be fair, most Scarfers will struggle with like some of the more defensive Pokemon. Like a Snorlax or Rotom Wash could take on some Scarfers, But I just wanted to point out that like lack of priority can be a little exploited there in general. Yeah. All right. We'll keep going. Noah, do you want to start us off with whoever's draft 7 is?
Yeah, that's going to be Sully. Pardon any interruptions. Obviously, there's a lot of things going on in the background, but Dragapult Mega Mawile, amazing top end. And then from there, it's interesting to say the least. I feel like I really like what Sully ends up doing with prep. And I think his team, I never want to write it off because I'm like, I feel like there's some vision he's seeing. And Dragapult Mega Mawile just feels really, really good to me. I don't know if I've ever seen that, which is crazy. Maybe it's just because I'm not in enough Map Dex leagues. But strong Steel, strong Ghost, strong Dragon, strong Fairy, like all those in 2 mons is really awesome. And I will say some notable flaws I see is hazards. This team is extremely, like, it's basically reliant on Sandy Shocks because, like, why am I running Stealth Rocks Mega Mawile every week? So teams may not have to respect Sandy Shocks, or it's like as long as they can like prevent it, it could be really easy to exploit that. I think the core Suicune Tangrowth is really annoying, but you know, with just some strong neutral hits, it could be fine. But it's kind of hard because this team is pretty decent defensively. I think it lacks a little bit in like strong special offense, other than Porygon Z, which in my opinion is kind of a trap mon. And I just wanted to mention. This is kind of unrelated to his draft specifically, but I feel like most of the trap mons, like Deoxys Speed and Landorus and Mew, were kind of like left absent, which makes this kind of a high bar for this season. I don't know. That's just something I've noticed. But yeah, I think this team is interesting. I'm interested to see how Slowbro Galar will function as a Terramon. I think that has a lot of utility, being like a random like setup sweeper, like Trick Room. Just randomly getting a coverage move. I don't think it gets Terra Blast. I don't know how the mechanics work, Sean. It does?
Pretty sure it does.
But, yeah, because it's in Gen 9. Duh. I'm just so used to seeing Slow King. I never see Slow Pro. But yeah, overall solid team. I think the speed is fine. I wish you'd kind of want to Pokemon in between the 100 Sandy Shocks or 101 Sandy Shocks and Cinderace.
I agree.
It's not the end of the world.
Yeah, there's a little bit of a
really
speed gap there. But it's like not a huge one. Very specific mons kind of like would exist in that space.
Actually, I don't think anything can take advantage of that. It's only 117 and 118 that can take advantage.
Yeah, so
116 it would tie with Sandy Shocks.
Probably not the biggest deal there. I like this draft actually. It's putting a lot of pressure on Cinderace to like deter hazard setting, which I think it's pretty good at, right? Like people see a Cinderace and they're like, oh, I probably shouldn't bring hazard stack. But, like, it is tough to see, like, this level of lack of removal on a draft otherwise. Like, this is, like, Cinderace is going to have to put a lot of just hazard stack deterrent pressure on a lot of matchups.
Or you're just going to have to run a bunch of boots.
Or, like, run, which, to be fair, isn't, like, the worst thing in the world. But it is kind of, like, I guess we use the word pigeonholing a lot. And, like, that's kind of what ends up happening. Like, a lot of mons end up having to run boots when they, like, would have liked another item. I like the Terra Slowbro Galar a lot. I feel like with Tangrowth, it ends up being a pretty nasty little regen core there that can give this team a lot of sustain in longer fights. And just the pivot axis in general, like, I feel like this guy, like Sully really nailed like slow pivots here with like a few good mons like that. And then otherwise, although they don't have like U-turn, I guess to be fair, something worth thinking about.
It's good at like doubling, but you have to be able to double it.
Yeah, so it's a situation that like, and Sully is a good player with like really good prep, so I feel like he's a player that can take advantage of that kind of stuff. But I really do like the Dragapult Mega Mawile. I want to just touch on that also. Like I really liked that combo, and I'm really excited to see like the breaking and sweeping power of Mega Mawile with Dragapult, which kind of appreciates like those holes being punched for it. And then the last thing I wanted to say was just like obviously we've got a little bit of a ground weakness here in general. Like Suicune can take on ground. Tangrowth is a great ground switch in, but overall there's a pretty solid ground weakness here when like we just said like Mawile and Cinderace both for their own respective reasons are such important mons to this draft for like that probably need to be there every week. So just want to be mindful of like how you're going to play around that ground weakness, and you can Terra Slowbro Galar to something that resists ground obviously, and that would patch a lot of holes in that sense, but something to think about. Sean, what do you think?
I really love this draft except for Suicune, which I feel bad saying because he got sniped on Swampert, which would be so much better for this draft, but and he knew I wanted Seismitoad, and he didn't take it, and I appreciate you. But I don't think Suicune was the answer. I think Suicune is really like an antithesis of everything this draft wants to do, because it hates running boots because then you can't run leftovers, and it hates like coming in, taking hits, and switching out because it's just not really built for that. But I really, really love the Dragapult Mega Mawile core because there's like so many Pokemon where, okay, like everyone loves to joke that Dragapult just spams U-turn, but like you just U-turn if the opponent like switch, like you have so many options to punish.
Yeah.
The Mega Mawile, like okay, I switch into my Fairy on Dragapult. Mega Mawile is just going to absolutely annihilate that. I think Porygon Z is generally not that good of a Pokemon, but I could see it doing here if he runs like Specs and Life Orb sets, because if he can get it in on things, even if it's not killing things, if like these are the Dragapult checks, like here's my specially defensive Pokemon, that's my Dragapult check, either I'm taking 80 from Specs Tri Attack from Adaptability Porygon Z, and now I can't check Dragapult, or I'm just switching into something else and it's dying. So I could see it being good there. Kingler, kind of for the same reason. Obviously, it's just like another low tier that he took. But I could see it being the same reason. I was kind of considering Terra Rampardos myself at points for the similar reason of, you can get in this big Terra breaker, use Terra to maybe clean up its weaknesses in terms of bulk, and just like really go ham on a lot of like very defensive Pokemon that would generally switch in. So I like if you just had like any different water type than Suicune, I'd probably say this is like my favorite draft there is. But
that is tough. That is
I
tough.
just hate Suicune so much. Like
Do you
I'd
think,
rather
like,
just run Terra Water Slowbro Galar every week.
Do you think like a Gastrodon or something would have been better? I don't know if that's available or not, but
I think it is. Yeah, I could see Gastrodon being decent. It's a little bit similar in the fact that it's like just very passive and a momentum sink, which is kind of what the strat want. It does give him more hazards and rocks and spikes, which is good, but it would definitely be better than Suicune in my opinion.
yeah, just like something to think about. All right, let's keep things moving here. Let's go to draft 8, which is, I think this is Sceptile's draft.
It is Sceptile.
I think Akeem, you should start just like trying to guess what draft it is at this point, just to like see if you can like gauge the vibes.
I'll give it a shot.
Who's drafting what? This looks like a Sceptile team if I've ever seen it
I remember
myself.
Sceptile being like a little like funky and being like, "Oh, I'm sorry, I drafted Shaman Sky and Sneasler," and I was like, I don't know why you're sorry. That's a weird thing to be sorry about. Like they're just too.
Yeah,
you with Jirachi too.
That said, like I feel like this is a pretty scary draft. I actually really like it. There's a lot of like, I don't want to call it cheese potential, but like sweeper cleaner potential that stems out of cheese potential. Like Unburdened Sneasler. Obviously, Shaman Sky can do its like flinchy stuff and whatever. Mega Garchomp is like I think like one of the better megas actually, and like so I'm really like excited to see that get some run here. And then like Terra Xurkitree is one that we were really like, I remember like debating whether we should allow or not, and so he went for it, and I think that could be a really scary mon as well. I really actually do like this draft. I think Samrod's a good fit. Like it's a pretty top heavy draft, but I'm a fan of that in general, and I feel like this is a pretty great one and pretty well executed. I don't like see like a ton of obvious holes. The only one I would bring up is like pretty much Delmies is your removal unless I'm mistaken. Is there something else that's a removal option I'm not aware of? Does Shaman Sky get defog or something?
I think Shaman gets defog, but it's not like a good defogger.
Well, you obviously don't want to be running defog on Shaman, like be clicking it, yeah.
No,
we should honestly just be happy that he has a spinner this season.
Yeah,
he is. That's true. Actually. A Sceptile draft is known to not have any removal options, so I guess it makes sense that Shaman Sky doesn't get defog because regular Shaman doesn't get defog, and I'm pretty sure they have the same move pool. Like one's just like a form change,
I can confirm they have the exact same move pool.
So, for whatever that's worth. But so yeah, having only Delmies as your removal, that is, and I like Delmies a lot actually, but that's a tough space to exist in. So that might be a bigger hole than we maybe gave it credit for, especially when you have like a Shaman Sky as a top mon. Like now it needs to run boots or whatever, you know. I don't know. What do you guys think?
I kind of disagree with you. I don't think this draft is very good. And a big reason why it was like, he's like, okay, I'm gonna draft Shaman Sky and Sneasler and Jirachi, and I'm just gonna make Covert Cloak really good for you. And then he was like, okay, and then I'm just gonna draft 8 knockoff users. And then he drafted like 2 knockoff users, and like one of them's a Liepard.
One of them's a Liepard.
That's actually a good point. Like you're saying, like so to that point, Sean. So you're saying
Like, okay,
it's the
my
situation
item-
where
yeah.
people beat one of your mons with the same things they used to beat another one of your mons.
Exactly. Like Covert Cloak is just like so high value, and I get like, okay, well if you're running Covert Cloak, you're not running boots for Samurott Hisui, but I think like you can choose the mons. Like I'm gonna choose my offensive mons that aren't taking those moves that are flinching me anyway, and I'm just gonna run boots on them. And the defensive mons that I need to switch in, which honestly, a lot of flying types are probably going to be pretty decent into Shaman Sky, Sneasler, Jirachi, that are just going to ignore spikes anyway, and run Covert Cloak and not get flinched or anything.
Yeah,
So I don't like.
That's a good point. I
I will
didn't think
say-
about that.
He uses Mega Garchomp really well. Props to him for that. He definitely wrecked people with it last time, myself included. I'm not a huge proponent of Terra Circuitry. I think it's just kind of whatever. But I think this is a good draft for it because there's so many things that you're worried about stopping that it's just one more thing that you're worried about stopping. And it always has the potential to run like a Blunder Policy Hypnosis set, get +2 speed, and it use Beast Boost and kind of just sweep the game from there. So he's got a lot of threats. Whether there's like pretty much no defensive backbone, like maybe defensive Jirachi in some matchups, but it's pretty much I'm gonna go and kill 6 Pokemon before you can kill 6 of mine, and that's the draft.
No, what are your thoughts?
I kind of agree with Sean. I think to a little bit of a lesser extent. I don't think it's like a really bad draft. I just think it's very similar to that one draft that he had with the Mega Garchomp with the Genesect, except he doesn't have the luxury of having a Genesect on his team. So I think it's significantly worse because of that. And I think there are a lot of defensive holes in this team. So like he's gonna have to really he really has no switches to anything. Like Jirachi is really his only defensive juggernaut that's really holding this team by a fucking thread. So I don't know. I think he because the only thing I'll say is I think there's a little bit of anti-synergy with the fact that he has a team that really benefits from having Covert Cloak, but then it's okay, I guess Rachi and Chomp can set up rocks a lot of weeks, which can be annoying with Samurott, but in order to get rid of the Covert Cloak, you have to be clicking knockoff, which means it's not a turn that you're clicking Ceaseless Edge, which with this team that's so frail, it's very unlikely that that's going to really work out as he wants it to. So I think it's a little bit of a below average draft in that regard.
I struggle to see how it's going to outpace other teams because it's also a little bit on the slow side. You have Sneasler that has Unburden that can come in, the one-time sweep. If that doesn't work, it's it's getting a little dicey. I don't see the magic with this draft. I think it's definitely going to win some games because there's going to be some games where I can out offense my opponent, but there's also going to be other games where it's I don't have much of a chance because their offense beats my offense.
All right, so let's keep it going here. Making pretty decent time. So we got this is probably one of my favorite drafts, but I don't know whose it is. Toaster Gopher. I think Spectre Mega Metacham's a pretty awesome combo, and I think Cyclozar and Klefki support that really well. I really like this draft. These first 5 in general, I feel like he nailed here's a sweeper, here's a cleaner, here's a breaker, here's a Cyclozar and a Klefki to support them in what they do. I think that's pretty spectacularly executed. So I'm pretty impressed with that. I guess the one thing I'd point out is there's like a pretty decent speed gap between Medicham and Dragonite on this team, and that's a speed gap where I think base 95, which is a pretty common one, can exploit it if I'm not mistaken. Um, so something worth thinking about. Um, I even like the rest of this team. Like I mean, Iron Moth's a really good mon. I think Mudsdale's really great. I feel like this is a pretty rock solid draft and pretty well balanced. It has some like defensive options to fall back on, but then it is really built around like these menacing upper tier mons and like supporting them quite well. I don't know. Noah, what are your thoughts? All right, Sean,
All right,
what are your thoughts?
maybe he's in a place where he has a bunch
Yeah,
of
that's
background
fine.
noise.
That's fine.
The first thing that I actually thought of when I saw this team was that I think it's really funny because generally the only times that Porygon gets drafted is as an answer to Spectrier, and he drafted it in the last round, so it doesn't. I don't think anyone else was going to draft Porygon as a Spectrier answer, but I think that's kind of funny. But I think this is kind of just like a better version of the previous team that we saw. Like it's got maybe slightly better defensive options, although I don't think the defensive options are still that good. It's like Mudsdale, Klefki, and then that's basically it. But I think the options that it has to go into are significantly better. I think the support that it provides to its offense is significantly better between Cyclizar and Klefki. And there's just so many threats. I mean, you really look at, like, these are 5, like, Spectre, Mega Medicham, Dragonite, Terra Okidogi, and Iron Moth. Like, that's 5 Pokemon that can win the game some weeks. Maybe not Mega Medicham, but it can punch enough holes that something else can win the game. And, it's going to be tough in prep dealing with all of these. I think it's definitely a draft where it's like, again, it's going to probably have to out-offense some other drafts. So, how well it's going to be able to do that, we'll see. But I think it's definitely way more suited to do that than the last draft. So I think it's quite good.
I think this team is really, really ground weak. Obviously, Dragonite being your only real ground resist is kind of a big problem to me. So I think any ground with, like, the coverage to be like, okay, I need strong neutral hits so that Cyclizar can't just, like, shed tail into Dragonite and get a free turn. And as long as you can kind of keep that in check, you're probably going to be okay. A little bit of a speed gap. I don't love that 110 to 130. That's, you're leaving a little bit things like Adamant Zamazenta or there's a lot of Pokemon that like in between 59 and 50. So that's definitely not amazing, but it's not the worst thing in the world. Trying to think what else. Yeah, I think overall offense-wise, it's amazing, but I think it's going to definitely struggle defensively to kind of get the Pokemon in. Obviously, Shed Toe helps with that, but it's still not like the ideal defensive profile that I would like to see in a draft like this.
I think it's like if this draft gets ahead of you in terms of sacks or like momentum, it's gonna feel like an unwinnable matchup. Because the draft gets ahead of you, they get like a free Shed Tail into something. You're gonna be like so far behind, it's gonna be very hard to come back. But if you don't give this draft the option, like if you apply pressure from the beginning and you don't give them the option to get in front of you, I think this draft will be the one that struggles to get something going.
Yeah, it has a really high upside for momentum, but also really high, like it's like teetering in the middle of the mountain. It can either roll forward really strongly and quickly, or it can roll backward and shoot itself in the foot. So I agree with that.
All right, so let's keep moving here. We've got our last few. Draft 2. Sean, why don't you start us off?
Jatoon. Let's see. Mega Latias. I think there's an argument it's the best Pokemon allowed in terms of pure power, but I think it's hard to use because you can, like, obviously people are like, okay, Mega Latias, I'm going to use it and I'm just going to set up sweep. But because it's so obvious that it comes as a setup sweeper, I think sometimes it can fall a little flat in that category. Because like it's so obvious and people, I don't know. I just think that Mega Latias, if he's able to use it some weeks as just like a breaker type Pokemon which it's kind of worse than Megalodios in that role. But if you keep people on their toes like that, I think it'll be a lot better for him the weeks that he does bring setup. There's a lot of Pokemon here that I'm just like not personally a fan of in Nat decks. Like, I don't really like Nat Dex Clef that much because I think it struggles with the higher power level. I've always been an Aegislash hater. I don't think it's that good of a Pokemon. Now that it's been nerfed, Mamoswine is like decent, but it's not like carry a draft good. I don't think the speed on this draft is very like it feels
It's
like
pretty
he's
brutal.
too heavily reliant on Leavanny and Webs to go up like every week, and you've got like one maybe you could run Scarf Mamoswine, but otherwise it's like Urshifu is pretty much the only like real good Scarfer. So and it's not even like the greatest. It has decent priority. It's not like the greatest.
Yeah, the speed on this draft is just really, really rough. Like Salazzle is not a mon that I feel like some people you're not gonna respect it every week anyway, and the fact that 117 is already bad, right? Like 117 is not like a good top end speed, especially in Nat decks, and it's also not even on a mon that people are like, oh, it's coming every week. So I feel like it's this, and then like you said, the Scarfers don't really make up much of that ground when it's just like Urshifu Rapid, and then like Mamoswine's a decent Scarfer, I guess, but that's a pretty rough space to exist in, like speed tiers wise, and like God, like if the solution to that problem is bringing Webs Leavanny every week, I feel like you've really put yourself on the back foot there. I actually like Clef. I had it in a Nat Deck season a few seasons ago, and I actually liked it a decent amount. Thought it was pretty solid. And I think Megalodios is an awesome mon. Aegislash is decent, so I didn't hate that, but just felt like I don't know. This draft is for me is kind of lacking in like a really good breaker. Like Urshifu Rapid isn't the breaker of Urshifu Single, and otherwise like it's kind of like Mamoswine, and that's about it. And like Sean said, like you hope Latias can kind of like sometimes be a breaker and have a little more versatility, but Megalodios is the better one at that, and Latias doesn't have like quite as much immediate power. So that's something I just kind of like took issue with this draft. I feel like it's a lot on like Megalodios to just make it happen with these sweeps, and like Sean said, like when people know that's coming every week, it's like a little less effective at doing so. Noah, what are your thoughts?
So, yeah, I'm in an elevator, but I'll try to give my just quick thoughts. Yeah, I kind of agree with you guys. There's not a lot of like pure breaking power here. A little bit ground weak, but also like I will give him some props. I feel like this team is like super anti. There's not a lot of Pokemon that are like, oh yeah, I really positive that stuff. So,
Yeah. All right, we'll keep things moving. It looks like
I think it's an overall like average draft. Yeah, go for it.
yeah. Sorry, it sounds like you're kind of cutting in and out, so I was like, let's just keep things moving quick here. All right, so we got this next draft. God, whose draft is this? Who drafted Meowscarada? Wait, this is Sean's draft. This is Sean's draft. What am I saying? I had to think about that for a sec. All right, Sean, you start us off actually.
Yes. So I was torn between Meowscarada and Mega Medicham as a partner, or Zeraora, and I ended up going Zeraora because I didn't want Meowscarada to be my top end speed tier, and I felt like it was going to be difficult for me to find something that I liked past the first few rounds of the draft. I ended up going with Melmetal, which is a Pokemon I've never used because I felt like it synergized well with Meowscarada and Zeraora, who both have pivoting moves to get it in, and it can come in and hopefully tear some holes. It's been a long time since I've drafted Mega Charizard X, but I felt like it fit the team very well, both in terms of giving me like a solid like 100 speed tier, and also solid setup option, which I don't have a ton of right now, in terms of like setup sweeping, and it can be a bulky mon as well. I don't love that. I don't think my removal is necessarily that good, and I think my hazard setting is even worse, which is a large reason why I'm not like super in love with this draft. I only have 2 rockers, and I have 2 removers plus magic bounce, which, they're not like horrible removers, but they're not foolproof either. It was difficult for me to find an ending I liked. I ended up going, Togekiss, Seismitoad, Espeon, Hitmontop, Palossand, Lanoon. I don't know. it feels like a very middling draft to me. Really, I think the top four are going to have to do all the dirty work because the bottom six are kind of just. I mean, Lanoon can be threatening in the right matchup if you're able to like actually get it to set up, but it's so frail that it's difficult to do that. So, maybe I can be able to position it, but I think the top four is what's really gonna have to carry me this season.
Yeah, so I would just say like I like your draft overall. I think your top picks work pretty well together, and it's nice that you have like this like I kind of said this with an earlier draft, but like you have this great like breaker, some good cleaning and offensive options there, and then Mega Zardex is like sweeping option as well. I didn't know like I don't looking at it now, like, I don't know if the Palisand pick makes like a ton of sense like in general. Obviously like I get like hazard setting and stuff like that, but it's not like I feel like when you have a Seismitoad like that's in such a similar space, Palisand
And
makes
a ghost though.
yeah, but like
Ghost and like
if
reliable
if the
recovery.
ghost
Good
was what's
idea.
important, like I feel like there's other mons in that range that probably could have like been a little less redundant. I don't know.
So actually, I did have Reggie Rock on this plan because
Dude,
it's
that would
not a
have made a lot.
redundant. So, but I realized that it actually would not be like Palisand is giving me a lot more. So the biggest thing with me is I don't have a ton of good special Pokemon. Like most of my offense is very physical, and I was worried about teams being able to run Iron Defense Body Press into me,
That's
and
fair.
being a very strong option, specifically on Zamazenta. So I think specifically in the Zamazenta matchup, I think Palisand does very well checking that because my best fighting resists Espeon doesn't have very much physical bulk, and then Togekiss is getting wrecked by Heavy Slam. So
Sure.
I thought that matchup would be like basically impossible to win if I didn't have this. And I think just in general, preferring Body Press was a big reason why I drafted Palisand. Um, they are both ground types. I needed another rocker is why I drafted another ground type. I couldn't have Seismitoad as the only rocker, and still not like great, but I think it is different enough in what it can beat that it was worth it. Whereas Regirock, it's like okay, Seismitoad is losing mostly to either like grass types or like stuff with grass type coverage, and most grass coverage is special, and Regirock is not beating special grass coverage any
Yeah.
more than Seismitoad is.
Yeah. Fair enough. Noah, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, so I think kind of what you guys hit on already. I don't really agree with that. I like the Palisand pick, and I think Sean justified it well. Um, yeah, I think the biggest issue I have is just that like high end special offense. I think that's really lacking here. It's really just Palisand, Espeon, and Togekiss. Potentially Seismitoad can run like some Scald or Earth Power sets, which prepping for Sean for week one, it was kind of like, oh, that's kind of annoying or this or that. But it was kind of like, yeah, I can just run a physically defensive mon, and as long as it can kind of take on the top like 3 out of the 4, 2 out of the 4 of the big 4, then it's kind of like I can just run 2 of those and it kind of deals with that. So I think it does lack a little bit there, but Espeon I think is a really underrated Pokemon in terms of Terra. Like I think it can do a lot of stuff. It's just one of those mons where like it kind of wants more speed, it wants a little bit more power, and you kind of have to pick and choose, and it's really difficult, I think, to use. But I think in someone like Sean who knows how to capitalize and make the most of what he has, I think it's going to be something scary. So I think the last thing I'll say is just I really like the Meowscarada Zeraora, which obviously don't deal well with grounds, or not with grounds, sorry, grasses. And then you have something like Melmetal Charizard X that like absolutely nuke those things. And then obviously Bulky Waters, which Melmetal and Charizard hate, Meowscarada and Zeraora can just absolutely exploit. And I love that this team has so many random knockers like Seismitoad, Zeraora, and then Meowscarada. Like you could just run knock on like something Zeraora or Seismitoad, and it's just like, oh shit, like like my helmet is gone. Now I'm like a really bad into Melmetal. So I think that could be really well piloted if played well. So I think it's not like the best draft, but I think played well, it can be really annoying.
Yeah. All right. So let's move to I think this is our last draft, right?
No,
Oh no.
2 more.
Two more.
After
Okay.
this.
Okay.
So there's this one and then 2 more.
Oh my gosh. Okay. All right. So let's talk about this one for a little bit. Sean, you want to start us off?
But before he goes,
Yeah,
what draft do you think this is?
Draft.
Oh man.
Yeah.
This is Martin's draft.
It's
Yeah, and
definitely
how did you know?
draft.
Because I remember
How did you
Sean
know?
telling me about Screamtail Mega Aggron.
Yeah, and
Yeah,
Colossal too.
Yeah, and yeah, Terra Colossal, Garchomp, fast dark type, checks all the boxes. I really, really like this draft. I think it's got a very solid array of um, defensive options, but also like a lot of things that can take a hit, but also deal damage. Things like Garchomp and Terrapagos. Martin is another reason I like this draft is specifically due to the coach. Like I think Martin, this draft like is right up his alley. I think he does very well with these bulkier cores that are, you know, fairly versatile and like hard to break between like Screamtail, Mega Aggron, Terra Colossal. I'd expect him to bring all three of those Pokemon probably most weeks. And you might not look at this draft and say, well, how are you going to bench one of Garchomp, Terrapagos, Greninja, Zapdos like every week? But that's kind of Martin's comfort zone, and he is able to do very well playing that style. So I think it fits him very well. I think, of the things that he likes to draft and he finds success with, this is definitely up there.
No, how about you?
You can go first. I might get cut off.
Okay. Yeah, I really like this draft also. It's got a lot of mons that I've like used over the years and have liked a lot, so I think that's pretty funny. There's like a lot of overlap here, so of course I'm gonna like this draft. I feel like it's got a really good job. It's just a good Mega Aggron draft. Screamtail's a good partner for it. Good Garchomp draft. Garchomp's gonna I feel like put in a lot of work here, and you support it pretty well. You've got some breaking powers, some hazard settings, some hazard removal and whatnot. So in that regard, it's really good. Terra Colossal also is pretty good for like the few things that can break through the Screamtail Mega Aggron core. I feel like Terra Colossal can kind of patch that up
Like
quite
Flash,
well.
you can do Flash Fire and then a different Terra type, and then you're covering like Aggron's fire weakness, and then some other weakness that you might have.
Yeah, exactly. So I feel like Terra Colossal like is really good at like patching that up and providing support otherwise for this team. So I feel like it's a really solid team. Definitely one of the better ones out there. Good removal options too. Like really puts it all together. Yeah.
I will say to kind of like it is a really good draft and probably one of the better ones that we have. I will say to kind of since you guys have been pretty overwhelmingly positive things, I do kind of fear this draft's capability to deal with setup sweepers. I think given because like Screamtail is a little bit I don't know why I'm echoing, but Screamtail is a little bit passive. Like obviously like if you can use a Terra type to beat like Thunder Wave or like Encore Screamtail, like I don't know. I mean that's kind of a lot to ask for. But like if you can kind of gauge the Screamtail set or like Mega Aggron, like if you have a good match of Mega Aggron, then I can like set up and then Colossal may be able to resist one of the moves that you're using against Aggron, but not the other. Then this team can really struggle in that regard. So he's going to kind of rely a lot on like Terrapagos from like, taking one hit and like being able to break back, which fair enough, like is a pretty good way to deal with that. So I think it's going to be a difficult team to break, but I think with like a team of setup sweepers or like just looking at like potential ways to beat it, I think it's just gonna trying to pick and choose what moves are just gonna be strong in general, and then just finding a way to like use the passive mons to your advantage. And I think this team does lack like a really hard hitter. Like obviously Garchomp and Terrapagos are decent, but like Greninja, it's like a little bit more of a little bit more of the frail, and can maybe hit it like for 60%, 70%, depending on the matchup. So I don't know. I'm like Zapdos Galar as well, but I'm not a super big Zapdos Galar truther. So yeah, I think he's going to pilot it well though, and I think it will be one of the better drafts and just better teams for sure.
Yeah, fair enough. All right, let's keep
More
it going.
drafts.
So I can get us started here. This is Axelraid's draft, I believe.
It is.
So I think this is a pretty good draft also. I'm prepping against it right now, and I don't want to give up too much away, but I'm definitely struggling with a few things here. So it definitely seems like a pretty good draft. He's like kind of got all the bases checked. Like his speed tiers are really good. He's got like a nice decent top end speed in a mon that you obviously is coming every week, so you're like have to respect very hard. It's his best mon arguably. He's got great hazard game in all regards. He's got like breaking options, some sweeping options, some setup options. He's got some good defense and things like Gliscor, Zapdos, and Empoleon all can be run defensively or frankly even offensively too. So I think this is a really scary draft. I'm pretty impressed by it overall. I think it's also one of the better drafts we have. I'm trying to like think about like what weaknesses I would poke in it, but I don't want to give away too much for my matchup coming up here. So, um, I don't want to get too much into it. So I'll let the boys take over here.
Yeah, I think if you're talking about weaknesses, for me, any kind of ice type that can deal with Empoleon, I think is very strong into this. Just having Megalodios plus Gliscor plus Zapdos. Obviously, Zamazenta also resists ice, but without recovery, and then you only get your defense boost the one time. Yeah, it can come in and threaten ice types out once, but I think ice types that can like consistently come in and like just deal a lot of damage are just going to be super annoying for this draft if they can deal with Empoleon, which granted Empoleon is a very, very good ice check. And, Infernape can also, it could switch in, but it's good offensively at deterring them. Obviously, both stab types, plus it has, Mach Punch or Vacuum Wave to kind of deal with anything that's trying to like maybe set up sweep. So I think it has options for ice types, but I could see that being a weakness defensively is trying to switch into ice types that can deal with Empoleon.
Not only ice types, but just ice ground coverage in general. If any team has ice ground coverage, then this team is really difficult to like switch into that. Like it's going to be like having to bring ice skew or like Terra overflow into like some neutral type or like just regular dark. I think the glaring flaw that I see with this draft, also a very good draft, is it seems a little ghost weak to me. Like obviously Zamazenta is someone that hates ghosts, and this team doesn't necessarily deal with that super well outside of like Overquill. So that seems a little bit of an exploitable weakness to me. Obviously Gladios can kind of just muscle through them. Things like Gliscor can kind of wear them down, but a good ghost type could really just be really annoying for this team, in my opinion.
Yeah, but I do think it's very solid overall. I think, there's definitely options for what we said. But yeah.
All right, so we got the last draft coming up here, I believe, right?
Yes.
All right, and whose draft is this? Who haven't we talked about yet?
Wait a second.
This is Noah's draft.
Yes.
Hey, give me 1 second, but you guys can give some preliminary thoughts.
We'll get started then. So,
myself.
I haven't looked a ton at this draft yet, honestly, actually. So I'm gonna kind of break it down on the fly here. Right off the bat, speed tiers are all right. It feels like there's probably some gaps in there somewhere, but nothing too bad, and it helps that they're mons that people are probably gonna have to respect, especially because like a Terra Iron leaves. But even still, like, kind of sparse on mons that are faster in general, which might leave you a little exploitable, like Scarfers and whatnot. I like the Lopunny Goldango. I think that's pretty nice, and then Roaring Moon complements that pretty nicely. Prim's a great mon. We made it a lot more expensive this season because it always gets drafted, and it got drafted again. So there's that. I think
I don't think it's like that crazy of a price though.
No, I agree. Rotom Heat, I feel like it looks like it's a pretty good like Goldango partner from what I can imagine in my head. And then
really like Rotom Heat on this team because I think it just fills like so many holes. Like Rotom Heat is just so annoying to like like a specific subset of Pokemon that I think otherwise like really annoy this team.
Yeah, I see that.
Anything that's trying to be a fairy into a Mega Lopunny and Roaring Moon, it's like, well, Rotom Heat beats most fairies, and it definitely beats fairies that are also trying to run coverage for Goldango. Right, I want to run my flamethrower on my fairy or my earth power on my fairy. Well, I'm not even touching Rotom Heat. Now I need to run another coverage move, which generally most of them don't get something that hits it super effectively.
Yeah, that's a good partner
like
there.
Fancy, but that didn't even get drafted.
And he's got some good like pivot options from there too. I like the Terra Eldegoss a lot too. I think that's a baller Terramon actually. That seems like gives some coverage, some like when it's like pretty defensively viable and got Regenerator, like give it some sustain. I like that a lot.
Right.
As like a secondary Terra option. So I feel like
Shout out Sean for that one.
That's pretty good. That one kind of cooks. I'm not a Glamora fan, but it's probably better than what I had used it for in the brief time that I had it a couple seasons ago. I think.
I don't think it will be, but go ahead, Sean.
I think this draft does make good use of it because Goldango obviously has synergy with Glamora because you can keep the hazards up. Megalopony has decent synergy with Toxic Spikes already because you can come in, click Fake Out, and rack up chip damage very easily. The one thing that I don't like about Glamora is I don't think your draft punishes poison types all that well. It's maybe Iron Leaves coming in as the psychic type, but you might be running some booster energy sets where it doesn't want to come in early. Xatu is not really offensively threatening very much. And there's poison types are already kind of good into some of what you have, like Primarina and Megalopony. So I think that's kind of the annoyance with Glamora here. So that there's kind of good and bad with it.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, I think I'm kind of so on this team. This feels like a very 7 out of 10, maybe 8 out of 10 team. There are a lot of really good aspects, and I think what Sean was saying about Road and Heat was kind of what I noticed when it wasn't drafted. I was like, by the way, with the Glamora pick, I was like, well, I need a hazard bot with Goldango, so it was kind of the best option between that and Clodsire, and I'm not.
The game could be a little better, but just Glamora and Piloswine, but both of them are, I think more so Piloswine is very consistent rocker. It gets it up on most things, and it has the bulk to get it up pretty much every
game. There's very little things that can just OHKO a Piloswine, so it's very good at getting up rocks. And yeah, I would love this team to have more hazards, but at the end of the day, I feel like this team can function with or without them, and that's kind of nice. Obviously, more hazard removal would be nice with the Road and Heat, and Glamora being really the only. Yes, you have Xatu and Eldegoss, which are viable, but again, are taking away from those top 6 or even top 5. But yeah, I think my favorite part of this draft is just Iron Leaves. I think that thing was, and I didn't really say anything because I really wanted to use it, but I think that thing is an absolutely insane Terramon because it can be a really good defensive Terra, especially with free Terra, and it can get out of, be Terra Electric, Terra Ground, to get out of Thunder Waves, but also give it a good coverage move or a boost to its Wild Charge. Also, I'm sorry about the stuff in the background, stuff like Terra Fire to get extra coverage on that. I'm really excited to see how it uses that.
All right.
So I guess that's all of them, right?
Yep.
So yeah, good luck to everybody this season. Hope we can get some feedback on what you guys thought about your draft, what you agree with, disagree with. Hopefully, was at the very least a little helpful for what you guys could maybe do if we gave you some feedback. But otherwise, good luck in Draft Classic 15, everybody, and we'll see you guys whenever we play you, I guess. All right, see you later.